Now, as we celebrate the Africa Day, the challenge of taking advantage of an open skylines policy is key for the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. So why is the opening up of the airspace on the continent important? Founder and publisher at Airspace Africa, Derek Nseko, joined us earlier for more.
Yeah, as you said, Africa Day, we commemorate the formation of the Organization of African Unity, which is now the African Union. And just from an aviation perspective, it really brings back some key policy decisions that have been made in the auspices of the African Union and that are important to driving our industry forward. I'm talking about open skies, which is the liberalization of air services on the African continent, a decision that is still very much lagging. And since 1988, this initiative has been on the table. And it's taken on different shapes and forms and different names over the years. And today we call it the Single African Air Transport Market. But we're still very far from achieving a single African air transport market in Africa, which is a huge, huge shame. And on the back of the coronavirus pandemic, which really has opened our eyes and to the need for us to have a more open aviation and air transport market, one that works better because the pandemic has really exposed, especially the poorly run airlines on the African continent. And it's highlighted those that are well run on the African continent, which just so happens to be the privately run airlines in Africa. But what we really need to do as an African continent is to shape ourselves differently going forward and to adapt to what the industry is demanding us to do. One of the key things that has really come up during this pandemic and as we've gone through it is that we've realized the importance of cargo operations. And cargo has never really been a fancy business. It's never had the glamour of passenger air travel. But we've learned that the airlines in Africa that have had a focus on cargo or that have been able to pivot their businesses towards cargo during the pandemic have really been able to cushion some of the pain. And those are some of the things that we need to take to heart in order to shape our industry. But on this Africa Day, we really need to focus as well on the policies that are important to shape our industry well beyond this pandemic. And the single African air transport market definitely comes into play. You're talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, all these flagship projects of the African Union. And for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to work, we really need a single African air transport market. We need liberalized air services, because trade on the African continent, we all know that transport on the African continent is handicapped by poor road infrastructure. And air transport is very, very key to that sector. So we need to be able to enable that and to make it much more efficient. And some of these policies are very, very important. The single African air transport market is one of the key enablers of the African Continental Free Trade Area, no doubt.
Derek, I just want to start from your last point there. You're talking about the importance of the single Africa air transport market. Just like the African Union has been in existence since about 63. This has been in existence since 1988. And the AfCFTA has been in existence since last year. Now, operationalization of these, if we're to draw lessons from those two bodies, then one wouldn't be so optimistic. But today we want to be optimistic. So what are those ingredients of a glass half full?
I do actually look at the operationalization of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which in itself, by the way, still has some way to go to be fully functioning. But I look at it as a source for optimism and a source for inspiration for the single African air transport market that is possible for all of us to come together and agree on key policy decisions such as this. So I think for me, I believe the aviation industry can look at that as a reference point to try and take the necessary strides that are necessary to get us across the line. Obviously, we are 54 countries in the African continent. The countries that have signed up to to the single African air transport market it's just over half that number. And signing up is not enough. You have to sign a memorandum of implementation, and you have to still effect it. So it's a long way to go, but I believe the glass is definitely half full, as you say, rather than half empty.
And just before we let you go, Derek, there's the conversation around, the vaccine passports are helping to open up air travel, but one also feels they may create more inequality, being that less than 1% of the population on the continent have received vaccination. What's your take and view on that?
I'm not a health expert, but I do believe that vaccination is one of the enablers that will open up the air transport sector, that will bring travel back to where we really know that it should be. And of course, mandatory inoculation is a different story, but I do believe that vaccination in itself is a necessary step for us to be more confident about traveling between one country to another, and for our governments to be more confident about passengers and different people coming into our countries from all over the world.